We're live.
We're live. All right.
I'm live with Nate Downing. Nate, you're in Montana. What town in Montana you live in? I forget.
Billings. It's the biggest city in Montana. I think it's 150,000 people. So yes.
Cool. And you moved there when?
About 4 years ago. So I spent, after I got out of service, I spent about a decade in a little town of Kingman, Arizona, which is a crummy little place. Who's listening? Beautiful little town on I-40 where most people have gotten gas before. That's about it. So that was 50,000 people. So for us, to step up, metropolitan kind of thing. So yeah. And then before that, I was in the Air Force for 14 years, and I met you way back in 1992, I think it was. So
yeah. Well, so that's where we can kind of start. So I've got this picture is probably the earliest picture that I know of, because this would have been, in July of 1992. Like,
yeah, it was.
And this is so this is from the Danger Construction Zone Keep Out. Do you have this Air Force Academy BCT yearbook?
I think I do. I think I have it downstairs. I just did a big purge, and I had the blue trunk full of stuff literally for 30 years, and it was kind of sad that day. I threw most of it away, but yeah, I think I do have that one. And it was a cadet chapel. Was that first basic cadet training, or was it second?
It's got to be at first, because it's in, like, you can see it's in the big chapel building, which was at first.
Yeah, and we weren't in Jacks Valley, and I was fairly pious and religious guy back then, and
I think 98% of basics go to chapel because it's the only place that's safe. But it says that you were joining others to sing and rejoice. So you would say you were really rejoicing in this photo?
Oh God, rejoicing to be away from Blaine T. Rocklets, or used to drive us crazy. So
yeah. And so then this is a fun picture. And I thought I had another one. Oh yeah. This is the same thing. So there's Snodgrass.
Oh my God. Yeah, Snodgrass. He's a big dude. He's like 6'6" or 6'9".
And did you room with him?
I did, yeah. One semester I roomed with big Snodgrass, and I think he had like a size 16 shoe, and remember the stinkiest feet in the world. And one day I put his shoes outside the door. Oh God, everybody's complaining about how bad they smelled. So he was a baseball player, and I remember he did push-ups one time, and his shoulder came out of joint. And then I saw him at Annapolis a couple years later. He was big enough they put him on the line there, and he was playing football and joined that. But yeah, I'm the handsome thin guy there next to Jared Farr. There's Jeff Cannon. And who's that talking to him?
That's Jim Cannon. That's Jeff's dad.
Oh, it's Jeff's dad. Oh, Captain Cannon. Holy crap.
Yeah, he looks exactly the same, or he did 2 years ago when I saw him here in San Diego. Like, the Cannons don't age.
That's true.
Did you play football too your first year?
I did, yeah. Freshman year. That's probably the only reason I got it. Well, that's the only reason I got in the academy. Yeah, I made it through the fall season, played spring ball, and then I didn't get cut, but I could tell guys my size and ability. You're just on the neat squad, and then they kick you off like your junior year and make you coach. I was like, oh, this doesn't look like a whole lot of fun. And we had guys in the squadron that played rugby, and it just seemed like a whole lot of fun. So yeah, then I started playing rugby. I think that's when I got in trouble. Yeah, into the freshman year, or was it sophomore year when I got in trouble? Anyhow, for our listeners at home, the academy was kind of a unique place where you were sort of locked down your freshman year, and people would mess with you and do different things. And nothing too terrible, but a lot of screaming and yelling. Hardest part was you just couldn't leave, and there was no cell phones back then. We had one call like a half an hour a week. So anyways, I got in trouble for underage drinking. I think it was my freshman year, and I totally should have been kicked out, but they had a thing where you could self-announce your honor thing. So I had used some guy on the rugby team's ID, and I got a minor in possession because I bought a beer. I didn't get to drink it. I was in San Diego, and I came back and I turned myself in, and oh jeez. What's that?
You self-reported.
I did. I self-reported. So that was the only thing that saved me. And if I would have said nothing, nobody would have ever found out. It was so stupid.
It was just your conscience, like the Air Force Academy's honor code got to you, and you
will not lie, steal, or cheat, nor tolerate anyone who does. They always just hammer that into your head.
You self-reported. That's amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, I did, and Then I started the summer program, and I was supposed to be put in what was called 41st Squadron, because they had 40 squadrons back then. Squadrons were these group of kids. And Justin and I were unique because normally you go through your freshman year, which is a miserable, horrible year, and they disperse you to all. So, because I mean, there's a lot of stuff happens, and you're crying, and you can't do a push-up, and you're sock partying people, all this horrible stuff. You're hanging by the saber under your balls. It never happened. That was at Nini. But anyways, it was probably good to get a fresh start. But for some reason, they kept us together, and I think we were like one of the only classes where that happened, where we didn't get moved.
Yeah, that's true. Like we spent all 4 years, the entire class stayed in the exact same space, and Jeff Cannon was my roommate the entire time, except for my freshman year when I roomed with Matt Ayers and Rob. Rob Lee. What happened? I thought you were Jesse's roommate the whole time. Where did he go when you roomed with Snodgrass?
I don't know who we roomed with, because I started out, I think I roomed with Mario in First Beast, which was, we both had a connection to North Idaho. I mean, just amazing, And then I think I worked with Cannon, for a little bit, and I think for Farr. But yeah, Jesse became my main roommate, and we roomed together. I think when I got put on probation is when I couldn't. Anyways, I might even room with Hetrick for a little bit. Remember him, another football player?
Oh yeah, I remember Hetrick.
So the reason I'm telling this story, so I get this minor possession, I self-report. I got this punishment of 101 demerits, 101 tours, and 8 months probation. So I kind of had like a second freshman year where I literally went crazy. You guys were just going out, and well, not much, but I mean, you could get out once a month, where I couldn't get out at all. And
for the audience, a demerit or a tour was 1 hour of walking back and forth with a rifle, just
marching.
It's a monotonous punishment. It's awful. It's a very good punishment, very good disincentive to not do things like self-report that you bought a beer with someone's ID.
Well, and the guy, I mean,
he didn't get kicked out, so that's good.
Yeah, and the guy's idea about his dad was a colonel, and anyways, he ran a bunch of shit. And it was the stupidest story you ever heard in your life, but, I stuck to that lie and protected people and took the fall myself, jumped on a grenade, what a moron.
Yeah.
But I went kind of crazy, and I don't know if you got that next picture.
Yeah, so the next picture on here, so there's a date on there. So this is May 27th, 95. So this was at our ring dance. So there's after you, when you're getting close to the end of your third year at the academy, your junior year, you have this ring dance where it's kind of like this culmination. It's something everyone looks forward to. And so you are wearing.
Leave that up to the audience. Go ahead.
You're dancing with Marcy Zink, which was my girlfriend at the time, and that's Jesse Smith. And is that the girl on the left? Is that Amy Escalante's sister?
Maybe friend. I think Amy brought a friend. No, but that doesn't.
Maybe Amy Cannon's.
Yeah, Amy. Yeah. Well, who's the back? The hair is that? Oh my God, that's my first.
That's Trudy.
Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. But yeah, so I went crazy, and I made this Indian loincloth, which I called the Mott Mott. And I had a headdress at one time, and the first party I think I went out to, I stripped down to that and drank 12-pack of beer as fast as I could. Well, probably a case. And good times. Good times.
It was very popular. People, it was definitely in demand. You just came up with it for fun? I don't remember the exact.
I think so. Well, I was on the rugby team. We'd sing songs. We'd do different things after the games. And I'd throw in some song and dance routines. And it was fun. I mean, nothing witty or talented, but just get together. Let's drink. It was. But I would pull that out. It was the last time I wore that. Again, it was probably 100 pounds ago. And I should have prefaced this. If my two daughters are watching, turn this off until you turn 17. Talk about a few things, and you may not want to find out about your mother. I mean, she's kind of a deviant person. She's a feeder. she likes to feed me. But anyhow, that was so. I think I wore it at some get together. I remember I had it on in a hot tub at Cannon's. I can't remember what that was for. Probably somebody. I think it was Ayers' wedding, perhaps, but maybe not. But anyhow, been a while.
Oh, I missed Matt's wedding, so that I didn't see that, fortunately.
No, you didn't.
So this is kind of just a fun picture. This was our freshman year.
Oh man.
And I don't know. This is just a fun picture. Darren Pence is on there because he was still with us, and Mojo Querol. So anyway, it's just kind of fun to look back, and I do wonder where everybody is because we've kept up pretty good with our kind of core closest group of friends, but every now and again in the Air Force you'd see these guys, and now it's a little bit less. So
yeah, it was well, I think it was in part due to the honor code. And funny, we just had a reunion a couple of years ago. We got together, and it was us. It stayed really tight, and well, except for one of them is ghosted us, but we were so afraid that someone would dime us out for our underage drinking. We get in all this trouble. So I think that was part of the reason that we segregated. But it was so funny. It was like 30 years later, we're telling stories, and I didn't do it, but Canon. Well, I guess I shouldn't name names, but three of the guys copied your. We had this like computer science course where you had to write in code. Do you remember that?
Oh, I do. Yeah, there was an incident in computer science where my code was used for a few people's project and technical violation, and I felt bad about it, and we got very close to being compromised.
Yeah, I think I took it the next semester, and it was something where you had to write some ancient coding language that I'm sure doesn't exist anymore, and you had to add I don't know, do division or some silly thing. But for our listening audience who don't know, I don't know how I made an academy. Of all these people on the page, I'm definitely the dumbest person and least deserving to be there.
I don't think that's accurate, but
it's true. But anyways, I had a hard time. I got by. I had one honors course, and it was, I don't know why, but they said never again, I'm sure. But the guy I'm talking to here, Justin Whelan, not only was, I can't remember, but the scholarship you got, I know it was right under the Rhodes Scholar. That's a little touchy. I probably shouldn't bring it up. But every class you took was honors level. And this guy, I had to just keep my head above the water. I wasn't getting totally drunk or bashing my head in the rugby field or going out with you guys. I did this read. And, he'd maybe put in like a half an hour, and he's getting straight A's in all honor classes. I don't know if there's ever been anybody at the academy that's equaled that. Maybe there has, but you're an extraordinary man, extraordinary intellect.
I did.
What's that?
I did work on my course load. I look back at why did I take all of those courses? I took more hours than was necessary. So before we go, I'll go. So I want to ask about your family and life in Montana, but so some other fun things that have happened since then. Well, actually, yeah. Let me go back to that photo. And so you got married and moved to Montana. And this is your family. This picture is a few years old, though, right? Your daughters are 3 or 4 years older than this.
Yes, Harper is, she'll be 11 in February, and Hadley just turned 8. So yeah. So yeah, I got a 5th grader and a 2nd grader now, and yeah, they started school in Arizona, and yeah, they've been here. Hadley started preschool here in Montana. Been going on 4 years. And so, yeah, my beautiful wife, Lisa, met her in the Air Force. It was after I got divorced from my first wife, unlike the narrative told by my first wife. we were stationed in, Offutt, which is in Omaha, Nebraska, and where we go after that. I think we went to Cannon in Clovis, New Mexico, which was one of the places that no one ever wanted to be stationed. But yeah, we had a lot of fun there. And then we got out and we had the girls in Arizona. And and then
Would you say your Air Force Academy education prepared you for life in the real world after?
No, it was not at all. I remember, I didn't know what the heck I was going to do. So I was following Lisa's career, and she's an attorney. She had a gig at her dad's law firm, even though he'd been retired. She became a partner in. But yeah, I'm like, well, I guess I'll teach school. I'll coach football, I'll teach school. So I started doing that, and I remember one time the principal came in and I called the room to attention, just out of reflex.
Are you serious?
Oh yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, and then yeah, teaching was okay, but it was my big joke is worse than being in Iraq, and real estate boom was going on, and I became a real estate appraiser. And yeah, I don't know, did the academy? Well, it was wonderful meeting you guys, but I come from, moving my hands around, you can't see them on here, North Idaho. I read this one thing, what is he, anthropologist, he talks about you go in these remote mountain regions, and you're going like back in time, you know, because people are just different. It's where the older cultures get pushed to, you know, because the other cultures take the good productive bottom ground and things like that. So yeah, I think I was just a little, you know, backward, naive, you know, big farm boy. And did the academy teach me? I don't know. It was an amazing experience. I mean, it was you know, so much, yeah, so much free adversity. It was really neat. My specialist, I became an air traffic control. Maybe could have been a pilot, but you know, we had the whole thing with Mark Dostal, you know, squishing out, and then the T3, which was a real bummer. And actually took our fighter, or the
classmate of ours that passed
what's
away.
that?
Classmate of ours that passed away while we were there.
Yeah, when we were there, who's the guy? It was General McPeak, I guess. Anyways, it doesn't really matter, but normally you'd get a pilot license and they'd send you to pilot training. And when we were there, they brought us these planes that could do, they're aerobatic, they could do spins and things like that. Where the guys before us did old Cessna 172, you know, proven technology. I think we lost, what, 3 cadets or something like that.
Did you know Mark?
I did, yeah. He was the number 8 man on the rugby team. And yeah, that was pretty hard. So so I did T3, and I was really good at the aerobatics, but I had no fear of the ground. And couldn't keep it straight and level, and I just thought, I'm just going to kill somebody. And I knew I wasn't good enough to get to, like you, get in a fighter plane where it'd be just me. It'd just be a cargo plane. I'd kill myself and everybody on the plane. So I'm not gonna, so yeah, I became an air traffic controller. Yeah, great idea. And yeah, I did that. So
yeah. So can you tell me, like, what in your Air Force background led you to become a designer of velvet paintings? Because how do I get in front of you? So this is a velvet painting that Nate made for my wedding, and this is like me and my husband Matthew as Spock and Kirk from the New Generation. And I've got another one here that Nate made for our friend Mario that hasn't been delivered yet.
Oh, you still haven't delivered that? Oh, shame on you.
I'm admitting that it hasn't been delivered, but Mario, it's still here. Mario surfing a C5, and it's got the 4th Squadron symbol on the top left, and it's got the Air Force Academy Chapel over on the other side. And you've done these for basically a bunch of our friends. Jesse has one with Hillary Clinton on it, which unfortunately she didn't become the commander-in-chief, which was the vision of your initial design. But how did you come to do velvet paintings? I mean, I know you didn't make them, but where'd you get this idea?
No, and sadly, the Velvet Pimp has passed away. He was a drug-addled man, and I've tried to get another one for him. He's passed away. So
the Velvet Pimp is the guy that made them, that created them in Mexico.
Yes, and he lived, I think, under a bridge, literally, in San Diego, and he'd go to Tijuana, and he knew the painter would get it done. So, you know, I got out at 10 years in. I was going to go to Korea. My wife would have gone somewhere else. And, you know, the Air Force Academy was all about being a lifer, you know, making it to 20 or 30 years. And I thought, well, okay, I'm getting out. So, you know, I was always with me. I felt bad about it, you know, that I didn't serve my full 20. And, you know, and I've always missed you guys. I mean, you've always been my closest friends. And, you know, we were quite busy when we first graduated and doing our different tech schools and things like that. We've always found a way to reconnect. So Jesse, my roommate, he came out to Las Vegas, and he was doing what was those things? Accident investigation board for yeah, but it was for a drone. I mean, it was the stupidest thing. Anyways, he had 2 weeks with nothing to do, so he'd come visit me in Kingman. I was a 2-hour drive away, and I took him out shooting and showing some different stuff. And he had this pistol that he really liked. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get this for him or mail him that one. And then I talked to him later, and he's like, hey, you know that pistol? I bought it. I'm like, oh crap! So there was the gift idea that I was going to get for him. So I got to thinking, what could I do? And yeah, somehow I came upon the idea of a velvet painting. And I did have a step grandmother that painted in velvet 100 years ago. Maybe it was some of those. She did these Jesus paintings. Anyways, so the one that Jesse, it was his head on George Bush's body for the mission accomplished, you know, when he did that flight. And then it had a big Atlas missile next to it. And then he had his arm around really buxom Hillary Clinton in like this bikini.
It's an amazing painting. I tried to find a picture. I just couldn't find it yesterday.
I could maybe pull it up on my phone, but but the funny thing was, everybody's kind of busy with their lives then. So I think I was the only one that went to Jesse's retirement because, it was a big deal. I think you and I
regret that.
Yeah, I think you and I went to Cannon's like squadron commander thing when he did that. I remember you and I just singing the Air Force song, get all excited. It's pretty funny. But anyhow, I went out there and gave him the painting. He said, "Oh my God, what am I going to do with this show?" And he just immediately slapped the trunk. And it was so funny. They just had this big purge in a squadron where even a lamp with an hourglass figure, they had to throw it away. There's no pictures of women anywhere. And I think we literally snuck it on base in the back of a car with a trash bag over it. And he'd sneak guys out like one or two at a time, open the trunk, pull the thing back. Oh, they'd giggle, they'd laugh, and they'd shit. So I know Jesse probably threw it away already or something, but it was quite funny. So yeah, it was a big hit. So I thought, gee, I need to do one of these for everybody. And of course, you and I didn't retire. So at the wedding, that was the wedding gift. And it was so much fun because I was talking to other guys about what we should do and different things. And yeah, it was quite entertaining. So yeah, Eric got a good one. What's that?
Yeah, no, it's fun. And I met the Velvet Pimp when I picked up Mario's at the border, like right down by Tijuana. He walked across and gave it to me. So
cool. Yes, I really miss him. He'd send these big like 4-page emails just ranting about random things. And yeah, he was quite an artist for a guy who didn't paint.
Yeah, and I was going to ask something else about the velvet paintings, but yeah, I guess that's about it. So I guess I kind of wanted to transition from that into the purpose of my podcast is about like beliefs and how people come to hold them. And so you are a libertarian, is that
yes?
Correct?
Yes.
And how long would you say you've been a libertarian?
Probably quite some time. I think I was a minarchist, I guess you'd call it, back even when I was in the Air Force. I was at Biloxi, Mississippi for some training class, and I was sitting in a room probably 2 a.m. or something like that, and C-SPAN was on, and they had the third-party debates. They had a guy named Harry Brown. I can't remember the other 2 people, but he was the Libertarian Constitutional Party, and I don't remember if it was Green or something else. And they're having this little tiny debate that no one ever watched, but everything that Harry Brown on. What's that?
You're just watching this on TV?
Yeah, I was on cable back then in a dorm room on a base, and I assume it was like a C-SPAN or something like that. But he just brought up some really good points about the limited government and how people can do best by themselves and what's the purpose of the state. So I think that was probably my biggest thing. I started reading little bits and pieces, and then it was fun to vote. I voted for Harry Brown. And gosh, what year was that? That would have been was that Herbert Walker? I guess no, it would have been after that. It would have been Bush the first, I guess. Yeah, George W. I think I voted for Harry Brown. And then they had this guy, Gary Johnson, who would run, and he was a governor, but he's kind of a boob. His big thing was like you're socially liberal but fiscally conservative, which sounds good, but it sort of doesn't have really any philosophical backing to it. But I'd vote for that guy, and I was, I didn't pay state taxes being in the military. I'd always assign residents to another state, so I wouldn't have to pay state taxes. So I wouldn't vote for anybody. And yeah,
adopted practice.
Great benefit, but so I just vote for the president, and then it was kind of funny when I got out of the military. I'm like, hey, I can finally vote for people now, right? So I signed up, registered a libertarian in Arizona, and I go in for the primary, and there's a ballot with literally one person on it. I was like, boy. But so I started watching. There's a journalist, well, more of a journalist, name's John Stossel. He used to have a show on Fox Business Channel.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I think I would TiVo it, and he'd talk about a bunch of the different libertarian ideas and principles. And he was sort of interesting because he was looking at my notes here. He was a liberal, and he came from some school back east, I forget which, and then he was like a consumer reporter. So he'd go out and he's like, look at these people, they're only selling you 11 eggs instead of 12, and there ought to be a law. And he'd get people real excited. Oh, and they'd pass a law. And then he'd come back, and they're still selling 11 eggs out of 12. And so he got to thinking, well, all these rules really aren't helping. What's helping is when the market goes in, and people are like, well, we don't want to go buy 11 eggs for this guy. We'll go buy 12 from someone else. So that's really what the force is, and kind of people do that by themselves. And remember, there was a libertarian, Milton Friedman. He did this video series, Freedom to Choose, back in the 80s, and he was influential in the Reagan administration, visited other leaders and things like that. Mm-hmm. And he was more of a minarchist, where they think, a little bit of government is good and less government's better than big government. He had interviewed his son, David Friedman, who had taken that one step further. And I always liked that concept at the Academy, Occam's razor. I guess basically I'm trying to live my life by a bumper sticker, just to get things narrowed down. So shit happens now. But if you take the next logical step, and it was the same thing in philosophy, where you work through the arguments over the years, and you had Descartes with the method of doubt, the cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am. And then, other guys, this guy David Hume took that down. He's like, well, do you really exist? Do we really even know? And then you end up becoming this thing called a solipsist, where you only really believe in yourself, but maybe not even. So anyhow, but it's kind of fun to go through these arguments. And one of the things I noticed is we were really beat real hot and heavy with the, just war, just ad bellum, just in bellum, way to fight a war. And all that just goes out the window. I mean, it just totally becomes kind of crazy. And that was one of the things Hume had talked about. So with the government, so what I've kind of believe now is these people that are minarchist.
What is minarchist?
Oh, it means like a little bit of government. So you want a little bit of government, kind of like constitutionalists, but even less so. They want, well, basically, there's no victimless crime, so you shouldn't have drug laws. You shouldn't have, things like that. Even, a lot of libertarians are even against speed limits and different things like that. So, but if you take that a step further, and kind of the camp that I'm in now, they're called anarchist capitalists, or they call them ANCAPs for short. And really, their whole thing is that the government is essentially evil, for lack of a better term. And this is where you get kind of in the whole crazy thing. But you could get by without a government, and you don't really need it. And I remember John Stossel interviewing David Friedman, who's an ANCAP, and he took his father's philosophy and took it one step further. And he's like, well, why can't you have private police? Why can't you have a private military? And I remember Stossel, just couldn't compute that. He couldn't make the next step. But that's kind of the step I've taken. And it's a bit extreme. And there's different thinkers in the libertarian world. And there's different people in the Libertarian Party. And I guess I'd be on the far right of the freedom scale if there was such a thing. And, I used to really think that, this would make things better. And I still kind of think that. But I'm at the point now where I don't really care if it makes it worse. I'd rather have us be free and be able to do what we want, as opposed to being, being told what to do. And the whole COVID-19 or COVID-1984 is what some of the libertarians are calling it. I mean, it's kind of crazy how easy it was just to lock people down and to shut their businesses instead of, just be safe, do what you want to do, or right. Not tell anybody to do anything, and the data that I've looked, some of these libertarian thinkers I like, they show a graph in one state that's locked down and a graph in the state that wasn't, and you can't tell the difference. There's no difference in the death rates or the infection. So, I'm not a doctor, don't claim to be, and we try to be a little bit safe, but at the same time, I take probably more risks than I should. But I think the onus should just be on the individual. You should do what you want to do, and I think that can work. It's a lot of things that are counterintuitive. You have to kind of you have to suspend your disbelief, I think, for a lot of things to see that, how it would work. But there are examples. There was a little town in England. They took out all the stoplights, and the traffic actually flowed better. And there's a concept called spontaneous order, where things just kind of happen. Now, I used to drive in Pakistan. I don't know if you can see behind my head that my Halloween outfit, I had to make it up, says the Great Satan. And I used to wear that in Pakistan. It was pretty funny. Oh my God, it was insane there. They have these big 6-lane roundabouts, and there'd be 14 cars across, everybody's honking, and I don't think I want to drive like that. But I think you could have, what's that?
Worked.
Yeah, I think you just have common courtesy. So one of the underlying principles is what's called the non-aggression principle. And it's kind of analogous to the golden rule, where we don't want to take aggression against anyone, and it's not pacifism, but it's where you own your own property. We're real big on property rights, and that's like the anarchists that you hear about in Seattle and stuff like that. They're really more anarcho-communists, where they want to take everybody's property. But we want to respect your property rights. We want to leave you alone and let you do your thing. And then we're all about voluntarism, contracts, and doing things through agreement and working through things that way. And there have been, I'm starting to read an anthology about it. I guess in Ireland they had essentially a private legal system where they had private judges, and you'd think that would lead to people paying off the judges, but in order to keep their reputation, they'd have to give a fair, ruling, and that's why people would come to them over time. And I guess that was one of the reasons why Ireland was so hard to take over, is the Brits would come in, they'd make a deal with one tribe, but all the rest of them would ignore it, and then they're back on this whole. I mean, they were conquered eventually, but it was sort of a problematic thing. But I think there is a lot of room for liberty. I don't know that it would be a paradise. I do think the examples of it in our world right now as an international community, as we trade. I'm talking way too much, aren't I? I need to let you get some words in here. As we trade amongst ourselves, I think all ships have risen. The poorest of us have gotten, richer, and then of course the richer have gotten richer too. But that's fine, and we don't bear any ill will to the 1%. We just don't want them to co-opt the government through crony capitalism and keep the rest of us down, which I think unfortunately is, capitalists are their own worst enemy, and you get that a lot. It's a lot easier to lobby Congress to pass laws in your favor, than it is to actually compete against your competition.
Yes, you said something that's interesting. So would you consider the world order of nation states, if they kind of live in a libertarian world, if they were all individuals, like sovereignty essentially sort of makes the world order a libertarian world order?
I think so. I mean, we've tried to be the world police, and we're right now we're the big.
Yeah, we're in charge, but
yeah, that's right. I'm like the president of the whole world. Funny thing,
well, so how did let's see, what was your parents' political leanings? What did you grow up with in Idaho?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I want to talk about nature versus nurture and being a libertarian, but yeah, they were essentially Republicans. They love Ronald Reagan. My mom's family, he was a John Bircher, I guess, but he was anti-war, which I'm not sure how that. He had one son in Vietnam. I think he had dual citizenship where he was a Canadian. I guess he was a pretty bad racist. The Birchers brought in some black guy to speak. That was it. He was done. He was out. And his son was president. But he had a fairly sizable farm, and I don't think he took any of the ag programs or subsidy things, though, even that he could have. And my parents oh, no free lunch for us, but we were poor as hell, and I'm sure we could easily qualified for it. And my parents, oh no, we won't go into the ag programs and things like that. I think they eventually did, but that's when I grew up. Was kind of this area of rugged individualists, and majority of people were Republicans. It's this steep mountain valley on this old Oxbow River, and most of the land's federal on either side of the valley. And you look up along the mountains and you see these big clear cuts, and those weren't done by private people. Those were all done by the Forest Service. And like my dad was a kid, they'd go through and they'd cut down these old growth cedar forests and burn the cedar because cedar wasn't marketable at the time. It was some knucklehead, biologist or whatever their term was back then from New York City, didn't know anything about the area. So, I grew up firsthand kind of, seeing the, evils, but, mismanagement of, of the public lands, by the government. And that's another topic, but yeah, I could go off to how, we talk about, most libertarians or someone like me, we don't think that there should be any public land. It should all be private and be put to its better use. But yeah, my parents were, Republicans, and we were big Reaganites. And, at the academy, of course, everything's great. And I remember high school wrestling when we were bombing Kuwait, and then we put on these turbans, we're running down the halls all excited. And I was so excited, get into the military and actually get out, and fighting wars, and this is the right thing, we're doing the right thing, looking back, maybe not so much, but and yeah, so that's something hard for me to wrap my head around. Did I really contribute? Why was I so gung-ho? I mean, I don't know, but remember we were at the academy when Clinton was in there, and Clinton won, and everybody was super bummed out except for Mathis Meadow and one other guy. Yeah, 2 Democrats out of 100 of us. Yeah, it was so funny.
I know. I always wondered. I'd love to ask Mathis if, like, was he a legit Democrat, or did he like being a contrarian, or was he just the only person that was confident enough to, like, say what he believed in a environment where it was? I mean, it's a conformist environment,
yeah,
sure, right?
Probably some of all above, I'd assume, but most people are just how they're born. That's how they come up. And did I ever tell you about Randy Weaver?
I don't know that you did.
Did you ever hear of Ruby Ridge?
I have not.
Okay, so this was so Randy Weaver. He was a guy that they had a standoff with the feds. He sold a shotgun that was 1 inch too short to the feds back in 1992, because we were in the academy that year. And there's different versions of the story, but these 2 federal agents came up to his place on Ruby Ridge, and he had a bunch of dogs. And
is this in the Northwest?
Yeah, that's where I grew up. It's my hometown. It's Bonners Ferry. And I had actually
in Bonners Ferry.
Yeah, I worked with Randy Weaver one summer. We worked at the same dairy together. And
okay, no, this is new information. I did not remember this story.
Okay, so yeah, I've got the signed book right here from Randy Weaver. It says, thanks for surviving Stevie's dairy, Randy and his daughter Sarah Weaver, which is kind of a funny story too. I can tell you about that. But yeah, the guy was a nut. He was kind of an idiot. He wasn't very good working at the dairy. He couldn't put up hay very well. But every day he talked about the true religion, about Yahweh and all this kind of stuff. For some 15-year-old kid, it was probably a bit much.
So Randy was an adult, and you're in high school?
Yes, Randy was an adult. I was in high school. Yeah, I'm assuming he was around 40. Maybe he was on his 30s. I think he'd been in the Navy, and then he worked at some. He was in Iowa. And he started his own little church, I guess, at different times. And he had, like, when women were menstruating, they'd have to live in a different house. I mean, he kind of had this kooky stuff. And he talked about all religions bullshit. Like when you say amen, you're worshiping, Tutankhamun, the Egyptian pharaoh. I mean, he was just probably as crazy as me as a libertarian. But anyhow, the feds stormed his house, and supposedly they shot one of the dogs. The kid's like, "You son of a bitch, you shot my dog." And he shot one of the federal agents. Kid gets shot in the back, and they have this huge standoff. And Randy, another man, his wife, his young daughter, his baby, were all kind of camped out in this Ruby Ridge. I'm turning the wrong direction here. And they had helicopters and tanks swarm my little town that delayed starting school a month. And Randy ended up getting, another guy got shot in the belly. I think Randy was shot too. I think he was shot in the shoulder. And his wife leaned out the door holding the baby, and the sniper shot his wife and killed her. And he actually won a wrongful death suit, I guess, against the federal government. And anyways, I was stationed in Oklahoma City, years later, and driving down the road, gun show, Randy Weaver's going to be there. So, okay, so I hopped in line and bought his book. And it's all these, weirdo, super right-wing guys, getting the book. And, "Hey, Randy, you remember me?" He looks at me. He's like, "You gained a bunch of weight?" I'm like, "Yeah." Oh, and he's just his old dopey self again. And he signed the book. So I'm sure I'm on Oklahoma City. It was not too long after the Timothy McVeigh thing. But supposedly Timothy McVeigh and the guys in Waco were all inspired by Ruby Ridge. So it kind of had this weird sort of connection. So anyhow, so maybe that influenced my libertarian thing, how we're kind of anti-state and, nervous about people coming to get you, I guess. So
yeah, that's interesting. Do you think your parents feel similarly? I mean, it sounds like they're Republicans, but they are like very skeptical of federal government action and that sort of thing.
Yes, I believe so. My dad saw this. Well, you coming home from school at 3:30, you'd see a truck full of Forest Service guys on the road going 35 miles an hour just to eat up 2 hours of pay, so they could get back to the office at 5 o'clock. And the loggers, the guys working for themselves, man, they'd be up busting their ass, from dusk till dawn. So, I just kind of had this stepping order that, they were somehow less noble. And then, they saw the mismanagement. I haven't told you this one either. When I was a kid, we walked up in this mountain meadow, and the Forest Service was bringing horses up there and shooting them to try and get grizzly bears established. Of course, the locals didn't want grizzly bears, but that's what your tax dollars, were doing. And we were these little people from the middle of nowhere with no influence. And we saw this firsthand. So, I think they've always been kind of mistrusting of the government. But at the same time, my dad's family, they were Depression era. His grandfather that raised him, I know he was a big Democrat, and loved FDR and things like that. Although they never really talked politics. But grandma, they always said she was a good chef on the economy, so she could make stuff out of government cheese and sugar and bread. I guess she could make pretty good cooking for just limited ingredients that you got from standing in line. But different.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And so, I mean, do you think that influenced what you like? You did study philosophy. I mean, I introduced you as a philosopher. You did study philosophy at the academy, right?
I did, yeah. I was a humanities major with a bachelor's of science. I think I graduated like 163 credit hours, which is, how did I have time to do any of that? But no, I don't. I just barely scratched the surface. But yeah. So trying to look forward in my life. What's a policy where I can be philosophically consistent? And I think that's one of the problems with both of the main political parties is they'll either say one thing or do another. Or, we're against big government, but then when they're in power, they spend more than anyone's ever spent in the history of the world. Every time. Yeah, government's never got, well, I guess, was it Calvin Coolidge? The federal budget was actually smaller, but I mean, that's one guy and all of our presidents. And they go. So I kind of like this. I like this non-aggression principle. I think that allows me to be consistent. And some guys kind of take it really far, where they think even voting is, it's an act of aggression against other people. You think about our system. I mean, it's just, one party gets to rule the other, based on 10,000 votes in Missouri. I mean, it's just, it's just so silly. And I mean, why are we putting, at least it's peaceful, but, I don't know that it's, based on our debt and other things we're doing, I don't know that it's a good, well, of course, all great empires fall, but I don't know if this is something that we can sustain forever. We've got the, what are we, 26 trillion in debt now or something like that. And then, luckily states can't pay money, or they can't print money rather. And I know all the state pension funds are, obscenely in debt, that they go on with these crazy, 10%, returns that they're never going to get. So I think if you added up the state, local, I've heard that it's our national debt's something like well over $100 trillion, which is just, crazy. And when we're no longer the world currency, boy, that's going to be a big old.
It's a recipe for danger in the future, right? Even when it feels bad now. Do you like espouse your political views to your family in terms like your daughters? Like, we're pretty young to have any conversations like this, but I'm curious if that's like something that you want to educate them on as they grow older.
I try not to inculcate them. I'm sure I do, but yes, my oldest says she's a libertarian. And when we lived in Arizona, who are you going to vote for? And she said Gary Johnson. Everybody was, who was that? And I've talked about the non-aggression principle, but again, I'm not very consistent. Well, I am and I'm not. That was one of the things that Milton Friedman said. Poor Milton Friedman, he gets really beat on by the guys that there's Mises Caucus, these guys that are real super freedom and the ANCAP. So I guess Milton Friedman actually came up with the payroll deduction to help fund World War II because he was an economist working in there. Mm-hmm. But somebody asked him, he was taking advantage of some government program, and people are like, well, why are you doing that? Because it's contrary to what you're saying. He's like, well, this is the world I live in. I'd be dumb not to. And that's sort of what I've done with my life. The best option for me financially was to buy back my 14 years of military time, and now I'm in the federal service. And so there's nothing I could do to earn that would get me an equivalent, no risk rate of return. Well, the risk is the government failing. Hopefully that won't happen in our lifetime unless China gets busy. But
right.
Wow, they could. So yes, I do talk to my girls. I talk to them about the non-aggression principle. What other things do I talk about? I say, well, you can basically do what you want when you're 17. Don't get married till you're 30, and that's kind of my only rules. Although we're not religious myself. We don't go to church, but I'm sent into a Catholic school, and that's a big joke. I'm a big fan of religious wars, and so hopefully they're getting that part of Western culture, while at the same time, being part. And I guess that's one thing that I'm doing that's pure. We're not going to the government monopoly schools, which is what some of the libertarians call them. So we're paying for the kids to go to this private school, and they're getting a good education. They didn't have a COVID slide like most of the public schools have, where their scores dipped a lot because that the last part of the fall or spring semester last year was just a disaster. Most kids. I was talking to some of the parents. The kids didn't even turn on their computers or laptops, for 2 or 3 months, and teachers were kind of powerless. So it's sort of a terrible thing. But
and did you pick Catholic intentionally, because you thought that a Catholic school would be good, or was it just like that's the best private school you could find?
That's the best private school we could find, and I'm a little mad at the Catholics. They had who was that guy in Chicago? Not Cloward and Piven, but who wrote the Rules for Radicals? That was.
This is out of my knowledge space.
Oh, yeah, this is the real dorky, autistic, libertarian stuff. But his name will come to me. But he was a community organizer, and he was a avowed Marxist. He actually worked with the Catholic Church, to kind of bring these ideas in. They have an old party, political party in England called the Fabian Socialists, and their mascot was the wolf in sheep's clothing. And their whole idea was to go into government and to make it bigger and bigger until it became, a socialist. And this guy, oh my goodness, the name will come to me in a minute. Anyways,
Taoist philosophy.
Yes, yeah, the wolf in sheep's clothing. Yeah, that was their. They wanted to tear down capitalism, and you've had really similar influences in America. Where they want to denigrate the founding fathers, and they weren't perfect, but Washington could have been a king. He stepped down, and they could. So they've got little things that they've always wanted to tear down America. And this guy that worked with the Catholic Church, that they'd find an enemy and they'd attack that enemy. And back in the 50s and 60s, it was like, an AT&T or something like that. And they'd, attack, and they'd get these minority groups together and they'd attack them. And that was their model. And they'd get concessions from this group, where they'd, okay, we'll give you guys some money, to go away or shut up. And I think the Marxists, the neo-Marxists, they've sort of taken that on. And that's sort of the whole Antifa, playbook. They get this one group really, really excited, get them to attack and riot. And now they've gone from attacking, private business to now they're attacking the government, or even attacking their own institutions, their own neighborhoods and churches, which is bizarre. But so anyways, in the Catholics, I don't know that they wanted that, but they were a bit complicit. So far as religions, I don't know that the Catholics is the best religion, but it's just not a bad one. And then the current Pope is not quite well, it's pretty close. He wrote a thing the other day talking against private property, which is like, what the heck is that? But, and that's where, socialism sounds so good, it's biblical, but at the top, you got God in charge, and then in your families, you got, your family in charge. But I mean, you try to do that with society, who's going to be in charge? How can you do that without monopolizing force and keeping everybody down? And, it's my understanding, and it's limited, every place socialism's been tried, you just end up with a tower of skulls. It's just it's incredible disaster. It just never, ever works. And yet people want to do it over and over again. Whereas I'd like to go the opposite direction and choose, freedom, and, see how our fortunes lie going that way. So,
right.
Maybe I'm crazy.
You may collapse into something approaching anarchy. Libertarianism can come out of it. Who knows?
Well, and do we really even need a state? I mean, there cryptocurrencies and things now. There's some people like, why do you have to choose? Is it where you're born? Could you just be a citizen of some place you want to? Why not make that a choice? Maybe something like that will happen in the future. So I don't know if you've ever seen the Babylon Bee, but they've got a funny article here. It's like, let's see. What's the headline? Libertarian man reminds everyone that all elections are illegitimate. And anyways, you talk about the threat of force, non-aggression. I never consented to this election. I'm now being detained under the result of this election against my will. He looked in the distance, his smug look only intensifying. I never signed your mythical social contract saying I would abide by the rules of people, voting for moral politicians every 4 years. And he looked to see his friends, and they'd all walked away. So anyhow, they always make fun of not having any friends, and there's something to that.
Yeah, those principles drive everyone away.
But yeah, I'm like basically a Ron Swanson from the Parks and Rec show. You know, I'm libertarian, but I work for the government, and it's just ridiculous. But it's funny. People don't really work for the government. They're just kind of there. The whole thing is about, getting time in and getting to retirement, and nobody's really dying to go crazy. Or, I'll point out, oh my God, we're wasting, billions of dollars here. Nobody cares. And it's like, all right. So,
right. Would you say that your experience, like working as an Air Force officer, and now you work for the Forest Service, right?
I'm working now for the Department of Interior. I'm in this branch called Federal Lands, and we do appraisals of different lands, either for acquisition, like a wildlife refuge wants to acquire some land, or they'll do a public-private partnership where they'll get what's called a conservation easement. Well, let's say we'll buy up this easement on this 1,000-acre tract where it can't be split into smaller sections and divided, and we do appraisals to find out what that, giving up part of the bundle of rights on the property, what the diminution of value is, and I'll write up what's called a statement of work for the appraiser, and then I review it, make sure it's logical, makes sense, and the taxpayer isn't being fleeced. And which is just, man, what's the old joke? It's like the only people that didn't have personality to become CPAs became appraisers, and that's about right. It's like the boring job, most boring job in the world. Yeah.
Is your experience working for the government, these two institutions, the Interior and the Air Force, like, do you think that reinforces, like, even though you're kind of inside the government, it kind of reinforces your libertarian beliefs because of, like, I mean, you definitely, I saw it in the Air Force, like there's so much waste. It's impressive. Yeah,
there's a lot more 1980 or let's see, catch-22 than there is other things. Yeah, it is crazy. Yeah, and it's good people, they're well-intentioned, and some people, are really good hard workers, and I do appreciate the people I work with. But yeah, some of the missions, they just don't make sense. Like the whole conservation easement thing, if there wasn't government support, government programs for it, there wouldn't really be that market. I mean, there could be. People could voluntarily pool their money, and they could do these conservation easements. They could, and there are private organizations that do that, but they're usually partnered with the government. But even the whole appraisal thing, I feel bad about doing. I did bank work for 10 years, and really we're just there as kind of like a guilt mop, because the banks don't even keep the loans anymore, so they really don't care what it's worth. They want a good appraisal so they can get a good score on it. And the moment they make the loan, they sell it to a third party that's federally insured. And then if the whole market collapses, they don't give a crap. Where, if the bank actually held the loan, they would really care about what's this property worth, and they'd be, more worried about my opinion, more worried about me doing a good job. So yeah, even the career that I, sort of fell into, I kind of feel bad about that. But at least I wasn't on the government dole, sucking the tit there for 10 years of my life. Oh, now I'm bellied up to the bar. I tell you, embarrassing. Oh.
Right. Cool. If you hadn't met Randy Weaver, do you think that you would have grown up as a regular Republican?
It's possible. Yeah. I think there's enough anti-government sentiment just where I grew up. In fact, the two counties I lived in, Boundary County, and then this place called Mojave County, they're only two places that Ron Paul won, I guess, when he ran for president. So I think I was just kind of in that area. And I think the Republicans and conservatives, they mean well, and so do the Democrats. I just have a different way of getting there. But yeah, I don't know though. I think George W. I mean, he really just screwed things up. I mean, the war was a mess. The whole TARP bailout thing was just so. Some of these libertarian guys that I look up to now. This one guy, Michael Malice, he kind of started off life. Well, he was a Republican. And worked for then he became a libertarian, worked for the Cato Institute. Everybody was so excited, when the Republicans got that super majority that, they're going to drop spending. And the Cato Institute, which is a libertarian think tank in Washington, D.C., they're selling, hey, do this legislation. You can cut this government program. Nothing. Not a one of them, So I think I would have lost, I guess there is a bit of faith with any political party or ideology. And I think I would have lost that, regardless, had I not been, growing up and with some crazy people, gun-toting knuckleheads, and like I did. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's like the experiences of what the government has done throughout your lifetime kind of reinforced the seed of what started maybe when you were young.
I think so. Yeah. And I just, the guy, Michael Malice, I listened to, well, I already mentioned, he started off as a bit of an objectivist, but he talks about this whole thing in libertarians where you've got this, they use the matrix analogy where you've got a red pill and a blue pill. And, if you take the red pill to see what's really going on, you're like, oh, wait a minute, maybe the press isn't making mistakes. Maybe they're actually trying to help, hold stories back and trying to propaganda us into going to war. And they talk about, the Bush-Cheney administration. Mm-hmm. And people are like, oh, that's crazy. That could have never happened. And like, well, what about Jeffrey Epstein? I mean, they literally held that story so they could have access to the Queen, to the royal family. I mean, it's just absurd, that didn't go out. So the red pill is that they call it the cathedral of thought, with the culture war, it's entertainment, pretty much all the news. They even lump, Fox News into there, that they're all kind of telling this narrative. And it's not that they're just accidentally telling the narrative, but they're actually doing it on purpose. They're telling somewhat of a false narrative. So, and again, that's why, some of us libertarians don't have any friends. But that's kind of the difference between what's called a blue pill libertarian, which would be sort of a minarchist. Like one thing I was listed there, like, oh my gosh, they're eroding the faith in the CIA. One of the libertarians was saying about that. And the red pill libertarians like, this is a good thing. You don't want to have faith in the CIA.
Eroding faith in the CIA.
Yeah, we don't want a CIA. We don't want an NSA. And it's kind of interesting, I guess. And that's why I think Trump was a good thing in a lot of ways, because he, I think he eroded, the respect, and the trust in the presidency. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, why do we need this president to lord over us and do these things? And I think that's good that other people, dead people still vote. I mean, how the hell does that happen? Yet there's no voter fraud. The only reason Trump got in was the Russians colluded to get him in. And now the election's totally, it can't be one and the same. So I think people are starting to tune out, to this narrative, and it is kind of, it's bizarre. And hopefully what we'd like to see as anarchists is, no government, peaceful dissolution of the union. If you don't have big states, you can't have big standing armies because you can't tax for them. You can't afford to build these nuclear weapons. But one of the points where I'm not consistent in is, how do you deal with China? And I guess you could have, the Bill Gates fighter squadron, a guy, or somebody could build their own nuclear weapons, or you could voluntarily get together and say, hey, we're going to fight China. They're going to take us over. Or, if enough people don't want to do that, it's okay, now we're speaking Chinese or whatever it is they're going to do. So I guess that's where I'm a bit inconsistent. I'm also inconsistent. I sort of like J. Edgar Hoover, which that doesn't make any sense. I think it was a real unique love story, his life, but communism was a total threat. And it wasn't just the worst thing that ever happened is these communist screenwriters, couldn't work for 20 years when they're on a blacklist. They literally wanted the Soviets, to come take over the United States. And I think that's good, that we fought against that. And it's sort of hard to square that, with my libertarian principles. I mean, how would you do that? I mean, the private police, you could do like essentially bounty hunters. You could pay for a private police force. You could do things like that. You could do private courts. But I mean, how do you, I don't know, fight against subversives is the right, but I guess people are actively, trying to take over your system. How do you fight that without a big, and that's one of the things I haven't wrapped my head around yet, but
yeah.
I'd like.
So you're still searching, kind of struggling with what the appropriate political philosophy for you should be, or for the country.
Not a philosophy, it's just a few issues, and libertarians don't agree on, several different things. Like, not all libertarians agree on abortion, or I got my notes here. A lot of them don't agree on trade. Some libertarians think that you can do like a tariff system, and that would be enough to fund the government, and it keeps our manufacturing jobs from leaving in theory. But some libertarians are total free trade. Some are, total free immigration. but a lot of them are with the social programs. You can't really afford to bring people in if they're, getting off the social programs. But, a good saying is, every mouth has two hands. So, we do want as many people as possible. But, I'd love to see a competitive system where we've got the lowest tax rates in the world. We're the most attractive. We're the most financially sound. And I think with the Federal Reserve and our fiat currency, I don't know that can ever happen. And it's the elites have always ruled the world, and no matter what system of government you have, they're always the ones in control. But right now, the elites profit so much. These big, and the elites aren't necessarily our political leaders, but the people that get them elected. You look at these big banks. They're getting all this trillions of free money that they turn around and make 500 basis points on, or 2.5% on loaning it out to someone else. And it's a great system, and they want to keep that in place. And they want to keep the military industrial complex in place. War is quite profitable for a lot of people. And I think it's really hard to come up with a moral justification to have a war. So I think we'd be much better off, drawing back within our borders and, making our government smaller. And then, even the state and local level, like when I got out of the Air Force, I bought this little building, trying to do some improvements to it. We tried to put a little window on one side. The city building inspectors came in and red tagged us, but they never gave us a red tag. And, I was just in limbo for 4 months trying to improve my own property. And that's just really maddening. It shouldn't be that way.
I'm familiar with the frustration of building codes and inspectors, and the local government. They have total power over. They can stop they can cost you tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on a project. An inspector, and you have no ability but just to please, I'll do whatever you want.
And the rules are so complicated, it's not a rule of law, that's how they're interpreted, which is a rule of man. And to me, it's a form of tyranny. And, it's really frustrating, where I should be able to build whatever the hell I want, how I want. And sure, I think good builders would get together and have builders associations and codes and the best practices and things to do that. I'm all for that. But there's a libertarian, Penn Jillette, he's one of the magicians, Penn and Teller.
Yeah.
And he talks about...
he's a libertarian?
Oh, yeah, big time. I kind of quit listening to his podcast because he hates Trump so much. And it was kind of it's old. But his whole thing is, if there's something you like, something you think is good, like a library or, whatever government thing, because, try not paying your taxes. The government's going to come and lock you up and, put a gun to your head and tell you that, So do you want that library at the force of under a gun? And it's sort of an interesting, litmus test, to yourself, do you want this hospital under the force of a gun? Maybe, but before we had the government, we had private hospitals. Rich people would donate money. They'd fund these hospitals themselves. To take care of the poor. If you look at medicine, the only two industries where the customer service has gone up and costs have gone down is your plastic surgery and LASIK. And there's no insurance, no government involvement. So in those two instances, the market has worked and the prices have gone down, and that's how I think. Of course, it'd be painful to get there. Not a lot of people, wouldn't be fun, but I think we'd be better off. And there's not really good examples because most of the world has gone to a socialized medicine. I think Singapore does a thing where they make you maintain a health savings account. So they force you to save. So that's not really square with libertarians. But I guess their costs have gone down and they have fairly good access. But, growing up in North Idaho, again, I go down to this town of Coeur d'Alene, big hospital, every other car in the parking lot, Canadian plates. Because the socialized medicine, they didn't want to wait. They'd drive across the border, pay for it to get it done. And it's the same way this day.
And it's like Canadians are coming down to the U.S. because they like our on-demand, pay-for-it-yourself medicine.
Yeah.
It was your experience.
Yes, and I believe that's still, I've talked to some people. A couple of years ago, we drove through the parking lot, and there's still a lot of Canadian planes. Pre-COVID. So, but and just the government just doesn't manage things efficiently. Remember the old, guns and butter in World War II, and you've got the Keynesians where we're going to inject this public spending. We're going to have these multipliers. We'll put in $1, we'll get out $3. Well, it doesn't work that way. You put in $1, you're lucky to get out 60 cents because it's such an inefficient way of distributing money. And I remember Obama had this gal, Christine Romer, and she was a big Keynesian. And she would get on there and talk, we're doing this funding bill, and this is going to drop unemployment down, from whatever it was, from 11% to 6 or what, she had all these hard numbers, and they're all based on these multipliers. And that's one of the criticisms of the libertarians of the Austrian school, is we're more kind of, we're getting to there for more of a philosophical approach through mathematical. But based off all that spending in the Obama era, none of those results happened that they predicted, because they were, the multiples aren't correct. And I think that's just sort of a carryover from, it's a misunderstanding of, how we got out of World War II. I think the biggest thing was, we had 80% of the world's manufacturing capability, and, we were free to expand and make factories. But, at the same point, there are ills to that. You do have these robber barons and people that pollute and things like that. But typically that's done in conjunction with the government. They'll get lobbyists or different people to make rules where it's okay for them to put their waste here. But if you had a good system where you respected private property, you wouldn't be able to pollute, someone else's ground. You couldn't pollute your own ground if it was going to come over. So you'd be liable, to a private lawsuit. And in theory, you could have an environmental system that works that way, and people get involved.
You, as a libertarian, the courts are very important. Property rights, and the courts, they're still, like, because if you injure somebody else, you still want to have a law. I can't wrap up here, but I just wanted to touch on this because I'm curious.
Yeah, you do want to have laws, and I'm rule-based, some type of laws, but I guess like the Irish, they had what was called common law. So they didn't have codified laws, but they get together in these courts and like, hey, you killed this guy's cows when you did whatever, and that was the common law. So I think there's some of that sort of exists, but we do believe in laws, and the minarchists more than others. They want to have a limited government with some other environmental laws and different protectionist things. So, God damn it, Justin! Thanks so much for calling me. Let me bore you to death.
This has been awesome. So I'm been reading a lot. Would you recommend Ruby Ridge, or what's the libertarian book I should check out so that I have a more robust understanding of the philosophy that you agree with, or that?
Well, Anarchy in the Law, it's an anthology. Some really good stuff in here. Let's see. There's a guy named Murray Rothbard. He was a really prolific ANCAP thinker. So anything that he did is just really interesting. I read an article. If you ever wanted to get into an abortion argument, I don't know why you would, but somebody used his arguments, and they talked about the rights of the woman to have like eviction notice. Essentially, you can evict a baby,
right.
But when it's viable, you're killing a baby. So, at some point you still need to figure out, but it's sort of a different, instead of good versus evil, or God or conception. So there's different ways to look at it. But yeah, Murray Rothbard, anything he wrote was just wonderful. If you get a chance to watch old Milton Friedman's Freedom to Choose, or I guess an old John Stossel. I really like these three podcasts. There's let's see, Tom Woods. He's pretty interesting. A guy named Michael Malice, and there's a guy named Dave Smith, and the three of them do different podcasts, and they're all part of what's called the Mises Caucus. Mises was another libertarian thinker in the Libertarian Party, and they're very much ANCAPs, but it's probably a bit much because they talk about what's wrong with the Libertarian Party, and nobody cares. We had a lady run for president this last time, and she tried to get the Antifa groups in, which is never going to happen. We sort of have the same interests, but to go out and court those people when they're burning down cities, it was just sort of kind of bad form. And that gets me to one of my dirty jokes. So if you're one of the you're standing by two popular girls, and you're kind of the one that has good ideas, you want to get noticed. You got to flash them. You got to do something. You got to get in their face, and just get their notice. And because she ran sort of a, we're not them, we're better. And that might have worked for Gary Johnson, because it was Trump and Hillary Clinton, and he got, I think like 5 million votes, and she got 1 million. But she didn't really get any liberty issues into the mainstream, and so you really need to go out. Say, provocative things like we need to arrest these governors and put them in jail for locking us down. You need to do kind of things like that. That's sort of what the Libertarian Caucus. We're not an advocate of running around carrying pitchforks, but
yeah, it is. Breaking through the noise right now is you have to say, you kind of do have to say ridiculous things. It seems like.
Yeah, get people to look at.
There's a lot of noise.
Oh, yeah, it's. Well, and it's true, you know. And do you look at it to this red-pilled light? You know, is it calculated? Is it put out on purpose? And maybe it is. And ultimately, the elites, you know, they run the Hollywood, they run the press. You know, look at Bloomberg. What he spent, something like $100 million in Florida. I mean, it's just crazy. And of course, they're going to influence the narrative. So, I mean, you know, what are you going to believe? What are you going to look at? But yeah, I know. I guess it's possible to live a life and be happy. And a lot of libertarians too are real positive, where things have gotten better. We've got a lot more freedom than we had, you know, relatively speaking, 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. So, and hopefully, you know, it'll get better. Although, you know, I worry about things, you know, for my kids with the overspending and different things like that, the Fed, and, you know, the loss of liberties, the cancel culture, the Facebook, you know, censorship. But hopefully, you know, that stuff will either go away. It'll be another venue in time, unless, you know, the government is colluded with the private sector, and, you know, somehow Jeff Bezos and Zuckerberg end up running the country. But I don't know. Probably won't happen.
So. Right. Well, yeah, it's a complicated world, and, you know, there's some authors out there you read in just philosophy that, like, going through a massive period of pain can kind of bring about a new order that is better. And I don't know, maybe that's what's happening right now.
Well, yeah, I'd love to see peaceful dissolution, and I hope people are, you know, they're less believing. And, you know, that it's not necessarily a good versus evil, and that's how each side sort of pitches it. And we got to get our guy in there. And, you know, ultimately, I'd love it, you know, if we just all kind of go for the greater good. And I think just by, you know, trusting people, you know, trading with people, and not applying force on anyone else, you know, like we talked about the building things. My neighbor's got a problem with me. Come talk to me. Don't go to city council and have them pass some ordinance and then come over and ticket me. And I mean, you know, just try and work things out at the lowest level. I think that would, you know, really be best. So,
yeah, rebuilding trust is going to be hard in this country, but I think it's a noble and desirable goal. So, yeah. Well, I'm hoping to see you in Montana sometime, and I hope the ski trip that our friends are talking about materializes.
Me too.
Anyway, see you, and I will see you all later.
All right, man. Thanks, Jeff. Bye, everybody.